anything, I can see that I'm not one of the more popular socks. So. I didn't come up with the title, Chuck came up with the title. What? I did, electronically. I haven't actually seen it in person yet. Yeah, I know. He told me, like, oh, we should catch up. This is so cool. Like, I'm joining OWASP and blah, 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 blah. So thank you for the tip. So I will find him. I hope so. I don't know. I got his phone number. I got his email. I said I'd see him here. If you see him, point him out. So. Check, check. Whoa. Alrighty, thank you guys for spending part of your evening here instead of being out enjoying the snow. My name is Doug Wilson. I'm here to talk about our new broken web application project. So a little bit about me. I've been an IT geek and the security guy at a lot of places I've been for about 10 years now. I started at a local DC web startup, and about 4 days into my job, an IIS box got hacked and nobody knew what to do about it. And I've kind of been stuck with a security role ever since then. My main focus has been incident response. Also do a lot of stuff with multi-tiered web application architecture, or at least I used to. But ultimately, what I really like doing is working with different groups and trying to achieve better security by making people work together. Little blurb here about my employer, currently working for Mandiant. They're helping sponsor this project. They're based out of Old Town Alexandria, mainly focused on incident response and forensics. They also do proactive assessment research, training at Black Hat and for clients. Commercial, federal, et cetera. We have a Mandiant intelligent response product, which is kind of cool. It's like a force multiplier for incident response. But anyhow, I do a couple things in the DC area. I'm the co-chair of the OWASP Washington, DC chapter, organized the CapSec DC Happy Hour, also organized an application security conference in DC this past November, hoping to do that again this year. So I don't know if a lot of people have heard about OWASP. If you haven't, it's the Open Web Application Security Project. It's one of the bigger names in application security. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. If you are new to web application security, the OWASP Top 10 is probably the first place you want to start at. You can go to OWASP.org, look around. There's tons of stuff here that I will leave till questions if you really want to know about any of this stuff here. But say you are new, you want to learn about web application security. Not everybody can start out as a elite ninja. Not everybody's a hacker from the cradle. And a lot of people don't start out in web application security. I know a lot of people who do a lot of network security that have recently gotten into web application security, whether they like it or not. Realistically, you can read books, you could go online, but you learn best by doing. And there should be stuff out on the internet about this, right? Well, yeah. Let's assume that you're going to be ethical about this. There's the entire internet full of websites, and most of them have some big security issues. But if you're starting out and you want to be a good boy or girl about how you're doing this, you're not going to start out by just going out and hacking various large websites or small ones. So you decide that you want to set up a website at home. It becomes a real pain in the butt, because if you really want to test on a real web application, you have to do all the stuff that somebody setting up a web application does. You have to get your server set up, get your web server set up, get your database installed, get your code running. And the point is, you just want to learn about web application security. You don't want to worry about all this other system administration stuff that's probably what you used to do and why you got into security to avoid doing. There are some training applications out there. OWASP has a couple projects. They have this thing called WebGoat that's been around for years. There's another thing called Vicnum that's come around the past year or two. There's a couple other projects in the works. There's some independent projects. There's the Damn Vulnerable Web Application Project, which I think recently got acquired by somebody, but still available. Mutilidae, Bad Store, it's another thing which used to be freely available. I think you have to jump through some hoops to get now. There's also a couple of projects that are a little bit similar to what we're doing. I'm going to skip over those for right now. I'll come back to those in Q&A if people want to talk about similarities and differences. But regardless of what you're doing, if you're trying to learn, or if you're trying to test a web app scanner, or if you're trying to test code review tools, or if you're trying to test out a WAF, you have the same problem over and over again. If you want to test something that simulates real web applications, it's a lot of work because you have to set up a real web application. So we're trying to solve a couple of problems here. We're looking for something where we could find web applications with vulnerabilities, where we can test manual attack techniques, i.e. the learning how to hack web apps, the tick or 1 = 1 stuff, but also web application scanners, also source code analysis tools, and also in the same environment be able to look at bad code and possibly modify and fix the code, and also have people do forensic stuff, see evidence left by attackers, see log files, see what happens when you put up a WAF or an IDS in front of it, see what happens when it's in training mode, see what happens when it's in blocking mode, test out a lot of different things. So we're proposing the following solution. Myself and this guy, Chuck Willis, who unfortunately can't be here today, although he was the original person behind this in this talk, we're basically trying to do this thing, which we're now calling the OWASP Broken Web Application Project. And the goal is to assemble a set of broken open source applications all in one place and figure out all the configuration headaches for you so you don't have to do it. Then we're going to put them all in a virtual machine and try and peddle OWASP if they want to buy off on the idea. Conveniently, recently, in the past week or so, this has become an official OWASP project. So yay, they've bought it so far. Base software, we're running on Ubuntu. We basically, for ease of use, have decided to not worry about having any sort of graphical user environment. Because when you start installing a lot of different web applications and a lot of different stacks, obviously this is all based off of Linux and Apache to some degree, but you have different databases and different programming languages, and down the road we may expand it to do even more things. You have a lot of stuff that you have to install. Currently, because there's no GUI, you have to do horrible things like manage from the command line. You know what, though? If you're the average user of this, hopefully you won't ever see it. You'll just boot it up in the VM, and then you'll go to a web interface and be able to take everything from there. But if you are one of the people who wants to go further, mess with it, install other things, modify the VM, this is basically what you've got available. So far, in the current working build that we've got, which is basically a beta version, we have a bunch of the things that I've mentioned which have propped up in different projects. We pretty much got all of them in one place. So we've got WebGoat, Vicnum, Utiliday, Damn Vulnerable Web Application, OWASP CSRF Guard, a bunch more stuff. We have something that Mandy did for our own internal training, which is a form in struts. We've come up with a couple forms in other languages. We're looking for more. I mean, ultimately, what we want, and one of the reasons that I'm here announcing this and talking about this, is we really want to just start compiling a ton of things and get it all working together so that people want to come and learn or test stuff. They can pretty much just fire this up and go in whatever direction you want. So if you want to do Java, we'll have it. If you want to do PHP, we'll have it. If you want to do .NET, we'll have it, and so on. We also, in addition to doing the test applications, are looking at the idea of doing old real applications. Most of the projects that have done this before have either done a test application or two, or they've done a real application or two. We're trying to cover all the bases. One of the things that Chuck and I have done in our day jobs with research is and one of the reasons people are like, why are you using something that's that old? Well, first off, it has holes big enough you can drive a truck through it. So for a learning environment, it's got a lot of stuff that's easy to track down. I mean, right now, people are like, hey, there was a vulnerability in that last version of WordPress or that last version of something else. Yes, there was. It was probably one vulnerability, and that one vulnerability triggered a point release. If you go back to something this old, there's lots of stuff to learn on. But the other neat stuff about going back to really old applications is if you follow a specific code tree, and this is kind of getting to a little side branch here, you're doing some code analysis tools where you're looking and seeing how good your hit rate is on detecting problems with code. Theoretically, if you're following the same code branch down without adding new features, just doing bug fixes, you should see an increase in your stats. So one of the reasons we're plugging some real old apps in here is the fact that we want to be able to do versions of these apps as well as time goes on. So when you're testing source code analysis tools and the like, you can see the progression and you can see if your tool actually shows it getting better and if that actually correlates with what was happening with the real code. Again, we have a bunch more that we're looking at and planning, and if people have like, oh, you got to do this one, it's great, please suggest it to us. So what are some of the challenges we face? Well, it takes a lot of organization. So right now, it's just being a small group of people. There are several other tool sets out there already, most of which are attack CDs. There's the OWASP Live CD. And this is only the web AppSec world. Obviously, there are things like Backtrack for network testing. But there's the OWASP Live CD, there's Samurai, a couple others. And I know a lot of the people working on these. In most cases, it's one or two guys who put in a lot of time. And not that I'm against putting in a lot of time, but ideally, one of the things we want to do is figure out a way to make it so that more people can collaborate, which will allow for a wider breadth of applications to be available. Because if we start maintaining 5 different programming languages and 2 different application stacks and running a couple different web servers, it's going to make one person's head explode. So one of the things we want to do is find a way to expand this out, organize, get more people involved. We want to work on documentation and the education piece. If you've ever pulled up WebGoat or something else, you'll know that it's one of those things where you can only be taught so much by a teacher who can't come down to your level. And I don't mean that to be demeaning, but like the first time I fired up WebGoat, I'm like, well, it says it has these vulnerabilities in it. And even though you're reading the instructions, you don't necessarily know what the heck's going on if this is something that you're new to. So one of the things that we want to do is have this be a place where you can come, fire this up, and be like, hey, how would you like me to help you with web applications today? And you can sort of follow your way through what you want to do and get feedback from some of the leaders in the industry. So in short, we want to make this a cohesive tool that really helps people in these research areas, not just putting a bunch of stuff as a collection on a CD. So that means documenting what the vulnerabilities are, showing people how they can gather evidence, doing all these various other plugins and things which a lot of tools and compilations of tools have started to address, and then they just kind of stopped because it met the needs of the people who were doing that project, and they really didn't have any need to go beyond that. So looking towards the future, I'm here because we want to get people involved. We're trying, again, as I said, to get it so we can get more people to collaborate, figure out how to distribute tasks. We've got some stuff up on Google Code. It's not that great right now. We pretty much have a big blob on a download server and some commentary up there. But we also want to get more apps and more app developers involved, more realistic applications. I mean, there's a lot more stuff out there. I mean, Adobe Flash and Flex are out there constantly. Flash you can do all sorts of crazy stuff with, but it's not just client side. You have AMS servers in the background that are talking specific encoded binary streams to Flash. A lot of government sites, for those of you who are local to DC, a lot of government sites are going up on Drupal. And not to knock Drupal because their core security team is really good and they're really, really focused on it. But even they admit, they're like, we've got the Drupal core locked down. We have no control over what people build in on top of that. Ruby on Rails, a lot of the little .com sites and trendy sites are built on that. And most of the time, the stuff that's coming out of OWASP and other organizations is really focused on things like Java that are used in corporate environments because that's where the day jobs are paying for the work to be done and it gets transferred over. So anyhow, if you're interested in this, we have basically a short URL if you want to get to it for owaspbwa.org because the owas.org site is incredibly long and ugly. We set up a Google group. Hopefully it will be populated by people. Chuck released version .9, which is sort of our beta at AppSec DC. It's mostly functional. It doesn't do anywhere near as much as we like, although it does everything I've outlined in the presentation so far. It has a couple bugs, but they're minor. And we're going to look at releasing version 1.0 later in 2010. We're probably going to do some point releases between now and then to fix up the bugs, but the other releases will pretty much be a function of what people do and help out. So I blew through that really quickly. But if anyone here wants to help, donate broke applications or feedback, please let us know. And now I will take questions. Or I could actually ask some of my own questions of myself that I skipped over early in the presentation if people are going to stare at me blankly. Anyone? Shmooballs? Come on, Rob. So, wow, I can't see them and they're missing me. This is awesome. Oh, question.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to learn web app stuff. I want to use those vulnerabilities in a web app to leverage vulnerabilities at the OS level. So, I care about Windows. Is there any thought to maybe putting some insecure apps in the box?
Yeah, see, the problem with that's the first thing. All right, so to address some of, to play my own devil's advocate here, there's a couple of questions I've gotten asked outside of this presentation. And, the questions are, why didn't you make it a live CD? Why are you making it a VM? Why is it running on Windows, et cetera, et cetera? The biggest problem with Windows is licensing. So it's one of those things where we're really, OWASP is really focused on things which, OWASP is a nonprofit. Like, they're a formal nonprofit. There's a foundation that has a bank account and funds things. We had a conference at the DC Convention Center. We've had conferences around the world. It's not a trivial organization, but it's really dedicated to these open principles. So one of the problems with having a project that does that is the Windows licensing functionality. People, I think, have looked at ways to get around it before, but realistically, I think unless something happens where Microsoft, allows for specific licenses for testing, that is always going to be a big issue with a project like this. I'd love to include it if somebody can figure out how we don't get sued doing it. Honestly, most of my web stuff in the early days was spent on IIS, not on Apache. But if somebody can figure out the legalese, we would love to include that. But that's pretty much the standard answer is it's not going to be done on Windows because we are really focused on keeping it all open source so that you can you can pull it apart and do whatever you want to with it rather than running into licensing and restrictions first off. So.
On the client side, like Flex and what have you, addressing all of those issues, that really seems to be where the problems are today.
Well, I mean, all right, the question was, what about Flex and things that are client side? That's really where the problem seems to be today. All right, so really it's a comprehensive problem. It's not something that you can just assign to that. I mean, if by client side you mean stuff is being exploited client side, I mean, yeah, people are doing that constantly, but one of the biggest ways that people can exploit stuff is they stick it on a server, and then you go to that site to get it. So I don't think that this project is going to be focused on that, but we're definitely going to have it in there, and especially if we move into stuff like Flash, Flex, and stuff that's back-ended by AMF and various Adobe formats. Client stuff is something you've got to consider, but this is really mainly focused on securing application code. But realistically, one of the biggest problems for clients getting exploited, I mean, not getting into the semantics of all the problems of, IE shouldn't have these vulnerabilities or this operating system shouldn't have these vulnerabilities, but realistically, you have a lot of servers that are neutral servers. They're not intentionally hostile. They're somebody hosting, Joe's Farm Service or something, or a sandwich shack. They're little mom and pops, or they're big businesses that you trust, neither of which intend to be hostile. But because they don't have good server security, somebody was able to put something malicious on them, and you got dinged by it just by going to an innocent website. So I guess we're not really looking at focusing on the client-side issues with this, but a lot of the client attacks are caused because somebody's web server application is insecure, and that allows them to be serving garbage in the first place. Does that help?
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with you, but yeah.
Well, I mean, as I said, there's a big philosophical debate that could open up there, but for the sake of this project, we're mainly looking at web server technologies and applications that are going to reside on web servers. So that's our scope.
How are you handling the more complex sorts of applications that don't tend to be free but still have large collections of bugs?
Well, again, that's going to be one of the challenges, and that's one of the reasons that we're looking to people to help out. Because if something does come with restrictive licensing requirements, we're probably going to shy away from it due to the nature of what we're doing. One of the things that we want to do, though, is a lot of cases, if you pull up an old version of something like WordPress or something else like that, it's blank, it's empty. And so ideally, if we get the right people helping out, what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to create more complex applications in the free things, which will model what's going on in some more complex real-world applications. Because right now, yes, if you stand up like WordPress or something, it's going to have some vulnerabilities if you're using version 2.0. But they're going to be kind of boring to do anything about. But if somebody has a website which WordPress has been integrated into, and it's being used as a content management system, and it's got some other plugins in it, that's going to be a lot more fun to attack. So again, with the licensing issue there, if something actually does have real licensing, we're probably going to shy away from it. But one of our hopes is, as this evolves, if we get people who are willing to, and I've got some local DC developers who are not security people who are interested in helping, which to me is terribly exciting, because I'm always excited when non-security people actually pay attention to security stuff. But the idea is that, again, if somebody's like, I want to model the behavior that's in this, or I want to sort of like look at the session management that's in this, maybe if there's a real need for it, or if it's really something that's being done in this paid product that you can do in open source and we can bribe some developer to implement it, great, we'll try and implement it that way. But again, our focus is in open source because we want this to be viral, we want this to be something that we can distribute easily and get out there. And again, that's kind of one of the double-edged swords of doing stuff under the OWASP aegis. But at the same time, if it was something with license, legally, I would have to charge a license fee every time I handed it out, and then you might as well be paying $1,000 a day for a training course. So. Is that like the second or third one you've missed with? Third. Awesome. Anyone? Anyone? All right. Well, I have managed to do this talk in a record amount of time. I cut it down and perhaps too much. But yeah, some of the other questions we've gotten asked by some of the people, like Kevin Johnson asked me about, he does the Samurai live CD, and he's like, why aren't you doing a live CD? Realistically, one of the things we're trying to do is we're tackling an incredibly complex topic, and we don't want to add any extra complications for ourselves. I see a use for live CDs for attack tools because there are, theoretically, above board, ethically, going to be the occasional situation where you want to magically turn a computer into an attack surface without leaving any traces on it. We think if you're setting up a classroom, though, a VM is going to be much more suitable because realistically, this is going to get big, it's going to get complex. The VM size is going to grow over time. We're helping to actually structure this thing so that we have basically a central configuration strip and a build, and we can pull from the SVNs of all the various different projects that are floating around out there, because we don't really want to maintain the code base on 50 different applications. But we do want to be able to coordinate so that we can pull stuff in, build it, and hand it to people in various different configurations so that they can use it. If you have to worry about making a bootable CD on top of that, you're going to blow your brains out. So we're hoping that instead it can be something that can be organic, it can grow, and the VM just seems to be the best delivery method. Because if we work out all the, and also there's the fact that VM Player is free these days. I mean, yes, I know you have to sign up for an annoying, give your email address to VMware or something like that, but there's no longer the barrier for VMware having a license required because you can just get VM Player for free. So we pretty much decided we're not ever going to go that route. We're just going to stick with the VM, and possibly if other player technologies come to be prevalent enough, we might support those as well, but right now VMware is where we're focusing. All right, anyone else?
We're out of time.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I couldn't even see them. I was just like, no, but I mean, I really couldn't see them. I was like, wow. So. That's my news. Hey, Doug. Oh, yeah. Hey. What's up? Yeah, it's been a while.